Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we'll look at how the Karpeles Manuscript Museum has connected Duluth to history for 30 years. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Here to take us through another of the Northland's unique museums is News Tribune reporter Terry Caddo. Terry, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you. I don't think I've done a museum yet, so this is I guess I did the Historical Society sort of.
There's the glass eyeballs and
there's that.
Loose connections.
Yeah.
You know, we've had the Three and Birthplace Museum.
Right. That wasn't me though.
Fair enough. But what brings us here this time? Let's start with what is the Karpeles Museum. And the Karpeles Museum.
So we're going to get this out of the way at the very beginning.
Please.
David Karpeles, whenever he was asked how to pronounce the name of his museum by the current director, he would always kind of avoid the question and wouldn't answer him. And he kind of would laugh at him. So if we pronounce it weird or wrong, or you think we're wrong, or we think it's just, we're going to put a disclaimer out there. It's an interesting name. We don't know. This is the way that I learned how to say it when I was working on the story. It is what it is. We're not gonna sweat it. We're not gonna worry about it.
I already screwed it up just then. And then what you didn't hear, listeners, is that when I start right off the bat, we went over this 3 times how to pronounce it. As soon as I read the intro, I immediately screwed it up. Immediately. As soon as I put it in a sentence, it was just gone. Okay, gobbledygook.
It's easy to do. It's easy to do. But I also get it as someone who has a last name that people really want to pronounce as Cadu or Cado or Cadio. You know, it's
Raise my hand. I was guilty. No one told me that's how you say your name for
so
a bit.
I totally get it. And I think I have relatives who pronounce it differently than me. So and this is how his granddaughter pronounced it, apparently. So anyway, that's all that to say.
What is this museum?
So David Karpeles was a kind of big guy in the real estate market scene, at least out there in Santa Barbara, California. He was born there and raised there as a child, but then in his teen years, the family moved to Duluth, and he graduated from Denfeld High School. So he's kind of a Duluth guy, kind of a Santa Barbara guy. And so he started a collection of manuscripts as he would go around and do his real estate businesses. He would go to estate sales and auctions, and he started collecting things for his own private collection. And eventually he decided private collections are all well and good, but history needs to be shared. And so he started creating these small manuscript library museums. So they would take the collection and they would make exhibits out of the collection, gathering pieces that kind of flow together, that make sense together to show. And they would send them out to their small half a dozen museums across the country. And they would put them on display. And one of them was here in Duluth because he's got that Duluth connection. And he was a Denfeld graduate. So it's been here since 1994.
30 years.
Yeah.
And just to get the dumb question out of the way, what exactly are these manuscripts? What are they?
So they can be just about anything. They kind of run the gamut all the way from they've had exhibits where they've had bits and pieces of writing from the set designs and or notes taken on set from Star Trek to right now there's an exhibit about Napoleon and different letters that were written around the time that he was running things overseas.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, we'll say that. As well as they just got done with a big herstory exhibit. There was a lot about women from throughout the ages. And but importantly, they are manuscripts. So they're things that are either typed but then signed or handwritten by these people. So that's kind of what makes them a manuscript. But they even runs as far as a couple of years ago, the director had a really big passion for the graphic novel series, which now became a TV series, which is why I did those. Anyway, The Sandman, and he had a big collection of signed, autographed, original graphic novels from Neil Gaiman, and so he put out that display around the time that the TV show was coming out. So it's a huge range of things.
And where is this museum exactly in Duluth?
Yeah, so you know where St. Luke's Hospital is? It's literally right across the street from that. It's up around the corner from the Kitchigami Club. And so it is one of the older buildings in that area because it was built in at least the cornerstone was laid in 1912.
And then years later, what was it originally, the building?
So the building is a former First Church of Christ Science Museum. So Christian Scientists. And so it was that for
Not
many.
Scientology.
No, tried to make that very clear with the story, but I didn't want to get into details of like explain, but that was a thing that came up way after Christian Science was a thing. But it is a little bit confusing because there is a sign in the building that said that they had a speaker whose last name was Hubbard, and people are like, L. Ron, and it's like, no, not that Hubbard, it's a different one. So it's a whole thing. Anyway, and so that was that for many years, and then was bought, and is actually one of several Christian Scientist churches that were bought by the Karpeles as they went around and started these museums. They built a good relationship with these churches. I'm not sure exactly how. That's the thing that happened. It just so happened that like half a dozen are in former Christian Scientist churches.
And I think you touched on this a little bit, but can you explain a little more, like how does it work as a rotating manuscript library?
So there's a large collection, I believe mostly in like Santa Barbara is where it's mostly housed. And then it's kind of different because a lot of times the directors of museums will like curate their own exhibits. But in this case, the exhibits are kind of created and they're sent out to the different places, and they rotate in on a quarterly basis, or at least they're starting to become quarterly again. For a while there, things kind of slowed down. I don't know if you remember, there was this like the pandemic thing anyway. And so that kind of slowed things down for a little bit. And so now they're kind of getting back up to speed, and they're doing it quarterly. Every quarter or so, they'll trade exhibits with another museum. And so they kind of get sent around. So they'll get packaged up and resent and then come back and might never see the same exhibit for dozens of years.
Is it pretty consistent of how many manuscripts they'll have on display at a time? Or
yeah,
roughly?
So they have a set number of cases, and they have so many cases that are dedicated to the main exhibit, and they do always have like kind of an auxiliary exhibit that's based on something else. So like right now they're doing a Titanic auxiliary exhibit that's kind of curated from different things.
And so before we get more into it, how did you come about focusing on this story for your next Northlandia? Like how does that end up on your radar?
Because I also really like Sandman. And so when I saw that there was this, I'd seen it a while ago when they were doing some other sort of exhibit. And I liked their Facebook page and saw they had different exhibits coming and going. And I think it was in 2021 or 2022 that they had this big exhibit, and they talked about how they had all these like Sandman original comics on display. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. So that was the first time that I went in there. I stopped in there on like a Saturday afternoon, and I was like, I have never been in this building before. And it's just right there. It's free to go in. You can just go in and browse, and the director will come in and talk to you quite often because he's there pretty much all the time. And so I talked to him a lot about Sandman and about Neil Gaiman and his writing. It was really cool because he's someone who Matthew used to live in the cities around the same time that Neil Gaiman would like come and also be in the city. So it's kind of fun to talk about that. Yeah. So that was what first got me interested in the Karpeles Museum. I was like, all right, this is cool. And so then I didn't think about it until I was looking for a story, and I went, oh, that exists. We should probably talk about that.
And then I saw Jed Carlson head over there for photos and such. Were you with him when he did that, or did you just send him over there?
He went separately for me. They changed exhibits on April 1st. So I was there back when it was still like the Herstory exhibit and whatnot. And so I was like, well, I don't want to have the photos up of it when it's stuff that people can't see anymore. So after they changed, then Jed went back and took photos.
Yeah. What's it right now?
It's the Napoleon stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
As well as the Titanic stuff that we kind of touched on, which is interesting because, again, that building was the cornerstone laid like months after the Titanic sunk, so it's kind of fitting.
It's a weird detail to think about. It's like, huh?
I know. It's like a building that's been around since then, which is,
Building with some history. And so why have a manuscript library? Like,
I talked to the director, Matthew, a lot about this. And he talked a lot about how it's a way for people to connect to history in a unique way. Because, I mean, we definitely all read, like, history books and we see things. But it's one thing to, like, read about it, and it's another thing to, like, see the handwriting of this person. You know what I mean? It kind of reaffirms their existence in your mind, and you may feel more of a bigger connection to them because of seeing that. That's the idea of it, at least. That's what the goal is to make this connection to history for people. Specifically, they were trying to provide it for like children and families and such. But that's kind of the goal, is to connect.
I feel like this ties well back into the previous episode we did. We're talking about the glass eyeballs and the museums and historical societies that were housing these kind of weird artifacts and like how we kind of need to talk about them a little bit because that's one of the ways that we're kind of keeping history alive, like if these aren't supported, like these manuscripts that were physically written are going to potentially go away. Well,
and it's a unique thing because, again, a lot of collections exist. A lot of people have these very extensive collections, but unless they're in a public setting, you can't really see them. And it's, what good does that do for the greater good? Anyway, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And so you said it's free to go visit. So what's kind of funding this whole operation?
They do take donations, but then also it is the family. So unfortunately, David Karpeles passed away in 2022, and his family keeps it going, keeps it running, and they keep the organization going as well as gain some funding and also some grants and some other opportunities for like things that are happening. They're hoping to get things going again. They used to hold a lot of like concerts and stuff, and right now they have some limitations due to some fire safety things. And so they're hoping to get that going again. So they're more of a community open space to come in when they can, because it's got really amazing acoustics when you walk in there. Like you can hear people talking from the other side of the room because it's just so acoustically based. It's kind of really cool.
So giving the heads up to easeDroppers.
Yeah, don't go in there and like badmouth it. No.
And if you don't like eavesdropping, be mindful of what you say.
Yeah, there's a chance that you could be heard. So, but also musically, it's got to be amazing to be in there and be playing it. So,
And what do you? We already touched on like kind of the general importance of museums and such, and how this manuscript library kind of fits within that. But how does it fit into Northlandia?
It's just this place that exists where you can see literally anything from like, I don't know, a Snoopy cartoon with a handwritten, thing, or some early Disney drawings from back in the day, to Bob Dylan things, to any kind of thing. And it's just there. And it's just kind of it's a unique thing. There are others throughout the country. It's not the only one. It's not singular, but it is different, and I think that just kind of qualifies it for a home in Northlandia because it's kind of an oddity. It's unique. Yeah.
Now I know you first went there because of the Sandman and stuff there,
yeah.
But is there anything else that like a kind of area of interest that had where to appear as a manuscript there that you'd want to like? I need to go check that out.
Let's see. Of the things that we talked about, I kind of wish I'd seen that Star Trek exhibit because that sounded like it would have been pretty cool. I'm not super into Star Trek, but even so, like it's a kind of a cultural touchstone for us. I mean, it's been on the screens in some way for over 50 plus years. So, I mean, it's a pretty unique thing. Yeah, that's a big one. I know Matthew, the director, talked a lot about how amped he was to see this handwritten card by Helen Keller. It was like a Christmas card that she'd written to somebody, and to see her handwriting, because we don't really think about like, I think we think of her a lot as like a child, but we don't realize how involved she was with like forming the ACLU and with the women's movement and such like that. And so kind of learning more about her and seeing her handwriting and seeing her as a fully grown woman, not just like this child from the miracle worker. And so it's kind of that was a unique experience for him for sure.
Wow, that'd be a cool one. For me, if I would go rushing if it was like anything like Tolkien, like Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, or anything like that, or maybe even Star Wars. I'm more of a Star Wars fan than Star Trek, but I do like Star Trek.
Fair enough.
All right, Terry, well, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column and see photos, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. There you can find all the episodes of Northlandia as well as on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber to the Duluth News Tribune at duluthnewstribune.com/subscribe. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.